What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had access to a forbidden library? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Let's go over this again. The young Kage leaned against the wall of the room provided by the Hokage with his arms crossed. The 14-year-old quickly learned the real reason soon as Council of Elders picked him as the next Kage. His selection had little to do with public approval and much to do with quite a few of the elders believing a young Kage might be manipulated by the elders to their own purposes. Of course, Suna opening up dialogue with Iwe with the help of Konoha was the last thing on any of the elders' minds. What were you thinking? Even Baki, the man placed in charge of teaching and mentoring the previous Kage's young children so they might best serve the village, didn't expect such an action. One meeting is very unlikely to change the animosity our two villages have towards each other. I want to perceive with my own eyes what kind of shinobi the Tsuchikage is rather than simply relying on the word of others, including that of the council elders. Unfortunately for Gaara, his older siblings and Baki were away on important missions when the time came up, possibly because another elder managed to arrange it so. This was how the young Kage set out from Suna with a few of the council elders for Konoha. But not before his older brother dropped one of his grins, the purple lines of makeup on his face making him stand out like a sore thumb. Man, it really sucks to be you, little bro. I'm glad they decided not to make me Kage, you know, given the fact I'm your older brother. Shouldn't Tamari be Kage if they were to pick based on who's the eldest of the previous Kage's children? Konkuro's smile faltered, but a smile appeared on Tamari's. That's rather sweet of you, Gaara. But I think you were the best choice for Kage. His older brother rolled his eyes. You mean they thought he would be the easiest one of us to manipulate if Baki's word is anything to go on? Personally, I wish he at least was going on this stupid peace talk with Gaara, particularly with those other two council elders making Gaara's life miserable. Gaara can take care of himself, but I'm sure Lady Tsunade will step in if she feels the need to. The fifth Hokage was definitely not someone to trifle with. Yet she wasn't here observing the two council elders lecture him regarding the proper etiquette expected of him at the upcoming meeting between the Kage and Tsuchikage. He didn't know why they felt the need to emphasize the fact Iwe was the enemy and not to be trusted, particularly the Tsuchikage. They also complained about possible assassination attempts despite the fact they were meeting in Konoha, an allied hidden village. Gaara was also a Jinchuriki, but the beast sealed inside of him, Shukaku, allowed his host the ability to use sand for both offensive and defensive purposes. For some reason, the elders also worried how the Tsuchikage would react to learning how young Suna's Kage was. He'll see it as a joke, how young you are, being the eldest of the Kage for the 5 great hidden villages. That's why you shouldn't have done this without consulting us. The elders couldn't make it any clearer what they thought of his abilities despite the fact they choose him for Kage. They picked you because you're the strongest shinobi in the village, not because they actually thought you capable. Shukaku chuckled in the back of his head. Long gone were the days when the tailed beast shouted in Gaara's head for blood. The fourth was also strong, so did they treat him this way? How should I know? They're boring me to death. Are you sure the previous Kage didn't die because they bored him to death? I'm getting your message loud and clear. Sand began trickling from the gourd at Gaara's side, waiting for just the right moment. In the old days, before another Jinchuriki knocked some literal sense into him, he might threaten them with some kind of bodily harm, even though he rarely if ever carried through with these threats. Instead, he formed a clone with his sand when neither council elder were looking, allowing him to sneak out the window onto the roof without being noticed. He now stood on the roof, his arms looking down while the elder droned on without realizing the young Kage made his escape. He listened for only a few minutes, before stepping off the edge onto a cloud of sand, something which felt like second nature to him. Of course, the clone wasn't the only thing he left behind. What would their faces look like when they'd realized he'd escaped? Priceless. The ability to create an eye out of sand which allowed him to see whatever said eye saw honestly came in handy, although he needed to close one eye to see what the eye saw. Doing otherwise would drain a lot of his chakra he could be using for other things. The amount of time allowed him the opportunity to eat a bowl of ramen with Naruto, the Jinchuriki of Konoha. The blonde-haired boy with fox whisker markings chattered away, But they were joined by Gaara's other friend from the village Suna was allied with, Rock Lee. And to think, nobody the wiser would realize you tried killing both of them a couple of years ago. I wasn't in a good place at the time, but thanks to Naruto knocking some sense into me, I actually came to realize the error of my ways. His facial features remained emotionless as he carefully ate his own ramen so he wouldn't make a mess, while his two companions sipped away. This didn't prevent him from feeling guilty regarding what happened, but bothered by the fact, I should have known better, though. Regarding the Cage's orders? That it wasn't him giving the order. The very idea he'd trust me, in my insanity, on such an important mission should have been enough to tell me it wasn't him, yet I'd not sensed his magnet release in months. The child seeking his father's approval shouldn't blame himself for noticing the father wasn't the father when he finally received the approval he long sought. Still, yes, I agree that Sakura is the most beautiful kunoichi in the entire village. Gaara's seafoam eye blinked. He took a break from watching the elders and looked over at Rock Lee. The exuberance Rock Lee showed for life constantly amused Gaara. He turned his head back towards Naruto, who nodded his head. Yes, Sakura is the best. Do you have anyone special like that? The question from the young woman who served them honestly confused Gaara. Someone you have a crush on? Gaara's mouth finally moved, the question still confusing him. How do you know? What do you mean? Rock Lee's bottom lip stuck out, his wide eyes somehow becoming wider. Isn't the reason you say Sakura is the most beautiful kunoichi in the entire village because you are? Gaara stared at his ramen, thinking of the correct words, before deciding to use the one Ayame used. Have a crush on her? No, Sakura is definitely the most beautiful. Naruto nodded his head. I don't see it. You aren't saying Sakura is ugly? Because I will fight you. Rock Lee stood up, standing ready to pounce, the bowl cut of his standing out like a sore thumb just like his green jumpsuit. No, isn't she also beautiful? Who? Naruto's curiosity was obviously perked. The ramen lady. I'm not a kunoichi though. Lady Tsunade is also beautiful, is she not? That old hag. Naruto glared into his bowl of ramen. You got a strange sense of beauty. Oh, I don't know. Ayame let out a laugh, her eyes drifting over to her father who ran the shop. For some reason, the two found the conversation quite amusing. I imagine Tamari would look a lot like her when she reaches that age. Dude, Tamari's your sister. I think Lord Gar is trying to say he doesn't understand what it means to be you ally attracted to someone because he's not experienced it before. Ayame's words made Gar's mouth move slightly, the fact he didn't understand bothering him. Don't worry, there's still time for you to experience your first crush. I guess. Gaara wasn't sure he'd have time for such a thing, given how busy he was as Cage. He closed one eye, bringing his fingers up so he might check on the elders again just in time to see one of the Konoha shinobi enter, announcing the party from Iwa had arrived. This was when the two elders realized Gaara made his escape earlier, yet they became quite panicked regarding the fact someone from Iwa might make a move. I've got to go. Gaara stood, bowing his head slightly towards the two who ran the stall before disappearing once again to the rooftops. He closed his seafoam green eyes, taking in the soft breeze which blew through Konoha from the forest which surrounded the place. He found the coolness a stark contrast to the hot, sandy winds of the desert, yet found himself enjoying both for different reasons. Of course, he didn't worry about the two elders finding him and instead found a roof to his liking and sat down, one knee pulled up to her chest while continuing to take in the cool breeze. His ears took in the sound of the small waterfall falling into the nearby pond while his nose took in the smell of water from the nearby sources mingling with that of the nearby trees. The place was definitely tranquil, allowing him to meditate and think. Gaara observed the person carefully from the rooftop where he sat with his knees pulled to his chest, his arms wrapping around his legs. The person who approached the secluded pond by the waterfall was a kunoichi. The color of her red attire was missing the right sleeve, while the left went all the way to her wrist where the black gloves started on each hand. Like many of the kunoichi, including his older sister Tamari, she wore a skirt instead of pants, but there was an additional layer on the right side. He watched her start moving, practicing the movements she likely used for her ninjutsu. She moved with poise, grace, and strength. She also didn't realize someone was watching her from the nearby rooftop and proceeded for some time in her personal training, taking deep breaths. Something made her look up, her eyes looking at him from chin-length black hair. her facial features forming a scowl indicating she was far from pleased at the intrusion, yet the forehead protector she wore clearly indicated she was from Iwa. Her hand reached for her flak jacket, allowing her to fling a couple of kunai in his direction. Gaara didn't move, he didn't need to. His sand jumped into action, stopping the kunai in midair. They clattered onto the edge of the roof nearby, but when the sand cleared, he saw she'd moved away from the spot. A voice came from behind him. "What are you doing spying on me, huh?" Gaara leaned back, letting his arms support him while he looked at the female who now stood behind him, glaring and crossing her arms. Despite knowing she was from Iwa, he didn't worry about an attack, given the fact his sand would automatically protect him from any attacks. Of course, what he said in response probably wasn't the best response. "You're from Iwa, and you're from Suna. How did you know?" He no longer wore a forehead protector, not that he ever needed one, but the garb which identified him as the cage was back in the room with the elders. "The sand. That means you're from Suna, logically. You're pretty." Indeed, she was pretty. For some reason, in the back of his head, the thought she was prettier than the other kunoichi he met crossed his mind, yet he brushed the thought away. "Do you have a death wish?" One of her dark eyebrows shot up while the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. "Actually, are all of you Suna shinobi this dense?" "What do you mean?" "The Suna shinobi are freaking out because they lost their cage? Can you?" The girl let out a sigh. "Is the cage really the strongest shinobi in your village?" "No." Gaara's seafoam-colored eyes didn't blink once. "My older sister Tamari is the strongest." "Yeah, wouldn't that be taken as treason if they heard you say that?" "Possibly." Gaara's mouth twisted slightly. "Why do people think kunoichi aren't as strong as non-kunoichi? Does that make sense to you? Are you trying to play some kind of joke on me?" "No, I'm asking an honest question. It's one which has been bugging me. Because people are East." "Why? Why are people East? How should I know? I'm not a guy, so I don't understand why they get so uptight about us girls being stronger than them." "Do girls get uptight about guys being stronger than them?" "Say what?" Her eyebrow twitched, yet she didn't make a move to attack. She let out a sigh, choosing to change the subject. "You never answered my question. Why are you spying on me? You're the one who didn't realize I was already here when you arrived." Gaara watched the corner of her mouth twitch slightly. "Do you mind me asking another question?" "Actually, I do mind." "Then I apologize." The girl sighed. One hand reached up and rubbed the back of her neck. "Okay, out of curiosity, what were you going to ask me?" "How do you know when you've had the first crush?" He watched her eye twitch right before his sand reacted, leaping up to block the kunai she threw at him, her angry voice coming from the other side. "What the hell? How old are you?" The sand dissipated, allowing him to see her face again and saw the irritation on her face. "I'm 14. Wait." Her eye twitched. "You're only a year younger than me?" She pointed a finger at him. "And you asked that dumb question? Why? If you are 15, then yes, I am a year younger than you. As for why I would ask such a dumb question, I've never experienced a first crush. At least I think I haven't. You." She continued pointing a finger at him, her facial features softening. "So, does that sand of yours protect you from everything?" "Almost." He probably shouldn't have told a shinobi from Iwa that of all things. "Exactly how close can I get to you?" Gaara's seafoam green eyes blinked. What? He honestly didn't know why she'd want to know such a thing, yet in the back of his mind, the thought he shouldn't have told a shinobi from Iwa that of all things became more apparent. She was definitely up to something. Without saying anything, she walked over so she was standing at his side, only a few feet away, a smirk plastered across her face. She then sat down near him. The closeness made the heat return to his cheeks, yet he didn't understand why. "There, you're doing that again." "Doing what?" Blushing, she scooted a little closer, obviously taking enjoyment in his reaction. The tips of his ears started to heat up, but the closeness. "You asked how you know if you've had your first crush?" "Well, yes." His eyes glanced down, seeing her hand move closer to his. "You, sir, are officially experiencing your first crush. Oh. I wonder how close I actually can get to you, given your sand defense." "What?" Gaara glanced up. In truth, he found himself even more confused. He knew she intended something, yet she obviously didn't mean him bodily harm, otherwise, she definitely wouldn't have gotten that close. He couldn't help but look away, the social situation definitely confusing him. Worse, he didn't know how he was supposed to act. Tamari wasn't around to explain. "Kuritsuchi. Shoot." Kuritsuchi muttered under her breath, glaring down at the rather large shinobi from her village. The Tsuchikage is looking for you. She stood up, brushing off the front of her skirt. I've got to go. See you later. She quickly moved from the room to the ground using her abilities, but her companion looked her in the eye. Where were you? Enjoying some time alone. Hurry up. You know how the Tsuchikage gets if we're late. Yeah, whatever. She left with her companion, but not before sending a quick glance back at Gaara. She wasn't smiling, nor could he read what she was thinking emotionally. He felt guilty. You shouldn't feel guilty for falling in love. She's from Iwa. He felt guilty because she was from Iwa in part. Yet Gaara also didn't appreciate Shukaku's voice piping up in the back of his head, having found a new way of messing around with Gaara's emotions. For some reason, Gaara felt Shukaku enjoyed the new way a whole lot more than the old way, something he'd never thought possible. So? And that's not the only reason. Shukaku laughed in the back of his head. You also feel guilty because you're going behind the back of your siblings either. What would they say? What would they say? Gaara let out a sigh, one of the few ways he showed emotion. In some ways, he found it strange. Not being able to show the wide range of emotions he began to feel felt strange given that he'd been told as a shinobi were a weakness, but now knew they were a strength. It all mattered how one used and controlled these emotions. In fact, his emotionless face felt strange, what with the wide range of sometimes unreadable emotions on everyone else's face. It wasn't that he couldn't relate, the emotions simply didn't register like they always should. He knew the elders from Suna would be looking for him, meaning there were probably not many places he could go. Staying in his sanctuary didn't feel right, not with the guilt pounding in the back of his head. No, the best move at this point in time was to turn himself into the Hokage, knowing full well the Suna elders would have likely dragged her into the whole mess. For that, he would need to apologize, didn't even mind doing so. He found her sitting at her desk in her office, sighing over a load of paperwork caused by certain young shinobi, the most likely culprit being Naruto, although Gaara knew he'd likely be added to that pile today. He saw the back of her light blonde hair and the traditional green jacket which covered her normally bare shoulders. He waited, waiting for her to notice, only for her to speak up. I know that you're there. He didn't say anything and instead slid his legs over the window ledge into the room. He walked over to the front of the desk, standing in front of her with his arms crossed. His seafoam green eyes drifted towards the ground. He fully expected the lecture, wanted the woman in front of him who crossed her arms across her ample chest to lecture him. Treat him like his actual age, rather than a mere toddler. That was one major difference between her and the elders of Suna. She treated him with respect. So, she leaned forward, her arms shifting from crossing her chest to a position where she could lean on them while folding her fingers together, her eyes narrowed. What have you been up to this afternoon while you escaped from your handler's clutches? What? Gaara's seafoam green eyes blinked a few times, the memory of how Kuritsuchi kept moving closer flaring forth along with the memory of how he felt. He felt the heat start returning to his cheeks. Oh, she'd of course noticed. One of her eyebrows shot up. You were with a girl? He felt the heat increase in his cheeks, yet also occur in the tips of his ears. Well, good for you. Gaara's jaw dropped in confusion. His eyes darted away, so he wouldn't have to look her in the eye, the way she reacted definitely confusing him. Look, I wasn't going to lecture you about taking off on those stuffy elders of yours. Goodness knows I got an earful from them when they discovered you'd taken off, so I'd a good idea why you'd left, given the fact they severely underestimate your abilities. But a girl? Gaara winced as she stood up, unsure of what she was going to do. So she's going to lecture me for that? It's not as if you've got a mother or father to lecture you for sneaking off for some hanky-panky. What is? Gaara didn't get a chance to ask Shukaku what said word meant, not that the tailed beast would tell him. Tsunade lifted up her hand, which could easily smash through his sand barrier and reached forward, making one of Gaara's eyes to close, not liking the experience. Instead of punching him like she would an enemy, she placed the hand on his shoulder, smiling as she did so. Good for you. I think it will do you some good, breaking you out of that shell of yours some more. That said, her hand squeezed gently. If you want to do anything past handholding and kissing, then you should come to talk to me so we can have a conversation regarding the birds and the bees. Why? The Hokage reached out and poked him in the forehead. Because that's a conversation normally given by parents, not siblings, and you don't have any living which can have that conversation with you. Gaara reached up and touched his forehead, his eyes crossing while he attempted to look at the spot she poked. Tamari. Tamari may have taken on the role of mother and father to you these last few years, but believe me when I say this is not a conversation you'll want to have with her. Tsunade clapped a hand on his shoulder. Anyways, you don't need to worry about them once you take off tomorrow. I've given the order that you are to be looked for, but that they're also not to look for you very hard. I'm off to get something to eat, as I've been waiting for you for a while now. Good luck. Would she wish me luck if she knew who it was? Yeah, I doubt she'd actually encourage you. I'm not sure this is a good idea. Yet you came back for more. Shukaku's personal sense of humor was certainly strange yet remained stark better than when the tailed beast attempted influencing Gaara in a rather psychotic manner. I'm curious. While that trait is normally admirable in you, it might actually backfire this time, but it feels like you're a glutton for punishment. Lady Tsunade said it was okay. Lady Tsunade is not completely apprised of the actual situation. He knew Shukaku was right, but all common sense told him the same thing. For some strange reason, common sense flew out the window. The sound of footsteps on the roof didn't make him look away from the sky above as he leaned back and looked at the sky. Soon, Kurasuchi's face came into view, smiling down at him as she leaned over. You're actually here. This is the place I like to get away from things when I'm here in Konoha. She glanced up, her gaze going over towards the waterfall as it fell into the pond. Well, it is a nice view, yet you're not exactly enjoying the view. Unless of course. He saw her grin widen, noting she found something amusing, though he wasn't sure what she found amusing. After all, I'm enjoying the view of the sky. You. Kurasuchi let out a laugh. It's kind of nice that you didn't jump to the other conclusion, you know. Other conclusion? Don't worry about it. She moved forward and to the side, sitting down beside him, pulling her knees up. She was rather close, like the day before, which resulted in heat spreading across his cheeks again. What happened next, he'd not expected, but the heat increased majorly as she moved her closest hand so I was over his own, touching him. Touch, it was still something he was getting used to, given the fact he'd experienced very little of it until 2 years ago. Touch, in general, made him feel uncomfortable, not because he didn't like it, no, he actually craved being touched by his siblings after having been starved of such attention from them for 12 whole years of his life. No, the discomfort came from not knowing how to react, yet in the back of his head, he could identify the crush feeling in his cheeks, the blush she'd identified. He turned his head towards her, wanting to ask how he should react. Completely not expecting her to lock lips with him. You know, she's just doing this to see how close she can get to you with behavior you find non-threatening. Though to be honest, if your siblings were here I think they might argue it is threatening, given how overprotective they can be regarding your social interactions. Eventually, she pulled away, his mind telling him he didn't mind if she was doing this simply for the reason Shukaku said she was. In fact, in the back of his mind he contemplated the idea he hoped this was the case, but the idea she might not be made him turn his head away. He felt her pull her hand away. What, you didn't like? No, it's not that. If you're worried I'm playing around with your head. Okay, she might actually be serious. I don't think this is a good idea. What? Her tone of voice sharpened, much like Temari's didn't when something upset her. Because I'm from Iwa, and you're from Suna. Not to mention you're the case cage. Shukaku let out a barking laugh, he was a tanuki after all. No. Gaara now sat up straight, his hands clenching together tightly. I'm a Jinchuriki. You seriously didn't have to be truthful with her. I mean, how often are you two likely to see each other? So? Gaara looked up, his seafoam eyes looking her in the eye, swallowing as he did so at the unexpected response. Shukaku piped up in the back of his head. Well, that was certainly unexpected. Kurasuchi's dark eyes narrowed. I don't get why you're so surprised. We've two in our village. Aren't the people in your village afraid of them? Because they're Jinchuriki? Or are you one of the few people able to take them down if they go on a rampage? Rampage? None of our Jinchuriki have. Kurasuchi glanced away. Sorry, I was insensitive. Roshi's told me before that the other villages don't see the Jinchuriki the same way as we do. He's been one for over 40 years. How long have you been one? Since the day I was born. No, before I was even born. That. Who would? This was followed up with, sorry. This is a sensitive subject for you. No, I've not lost control in 2 years, but the village isn't as afraid of me as they used to be. At least I don't think they are. More importantly, I'm on good terms with my older siblings. Including that sister of yours that you say is stronger than you? Did she used to take you out? No. She'd wind me down because, well, she's my sister. Looking back, she did show she cared in various ways despite the fact she was afraid of me. Gaara leaned forward. He wasn't one to say much, not to mention he really shouldn't be sharing such intimate details with someone who was a stranger. He couldn't lie, yet it also felt cathartic. That said, if I were to ever lose it, I'd trust her and my brother to stop me just like they'd trust me to not lose control. That. Kurasuchi glanced up at the sky. Trust is definitely important, but I am glad you were honest with me. Actually, there. Someone called out to her, the same person as yesterday. Sorry, I've got to go. The Tsuchikage is likely wanting me to be prepared for tomorrow's meeting with the case cage. Kurasuchi stood up. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a smile on her face. That thing you want to be honest with me about? You can tell me later, after the meeting. A laugh broke out in the back of his head. Oh my gosh, you were trying to tell her you are the case cage. What have you gotten yourself into? What have I gotten myself into? What Shukaku said the day before finally sunk in when he walked into the meeting room, coming in after the Tsuchikage upon the request of Iwa, and he saw Kurasuchi sitting on the front of the table sitting with her legs crossed, a smirk upon her face. Seeing her, a slight flush appeared on his face briefly. He hoped he would regain his composure before anyone noticed his reaction. The twinkle in her eye, Kurasuchi definitely seemed amused. He sat down, the elders of Suna flanking him, the Tsuchikage watching him carefully while Tsunade sat at the table so she might mediate as the Hokage of Konoha. Gaara's mind spun. Shukaku laughed at the situation Gaara didn't at all find funny. His eyes drifted around Iwa's party, carefully taking in the party present, only noticing the rather large-sized companion of Kurasuchi, yet something told him that, if they'd brought more from Suna, then so had Iwa. The old man spoke first, his eyes narrowing. Aren't you rather young to be a cage? Gaara's hand rested on the top of his table, not moving. In fact, he remained emotionless outside of that one slip-up at the beginning, his mouth forming a thin line. He wondered, in the back of his mind, what Kurasuchi was thinking, given the fact he'd not revealed the fact he was the case cage. Does she feel I betrayed her? By not telling her? Apologies. Our young case cage requested this meeting with you without consulting us. Oh? One white eyebrow shot up, the man tucking his hands behind his back. I say you made a mistake in picking him, haven't you? Out of the corner of his eye, Gaara saw Tsunade's eye twitch, her mouth twitch, both indicators that she was not thrilled with the apparent disrespect. She cleared her throat. Excuse me? The man looked over at her, smirking. Gaara felt his facial features soften, his head tilting slightly. They're related. The Tsuchikage and Kurasuchi. Doesn't he have a lot more spunk than that old fart Rasa? Gaara's eyes blinked, while the elders both let out gasps. Are you making a joke? I mean, wasn't the previous case cage younger than you? The man turned his head, his interest still obviously perked. So, you can speak. His mouth twisted, carefully contemplating the situation. He finally said, it is a joke, but I honestly don't get it. Tsunade let out a sigh, touching her forehead with the palm of her head. She removed her hand, smiling at him, although it was obvious, he'd said something odd. If I said something out of turn, I do apologize. I don't understand humor very well. The old man obviously found amusement at his statement, but one of his fingers pointed at Gaara. Well, you certainly are truthful. Yes, I was making jest at the previous case cage expense. Your council certainly has bit off more than they can chew, and not because of your age. Something tells me they've definitely underestimated you, haven't they? Perhaps. My question is, what do you expect of this meeting? Nothing. And everything. Gaara watched the smile falter from the man's face, but the smile on Kurasuchi's fell. Her eyes blinked, and she leaned over and whispered into the old man's ear at great length. Gaara didn't react, letting her say her piece, even if she did out him regarding their meeting the other day. Of course, given what he'd said. Yeah, you just sounded like a creep, in my opinion. No wonder she's ratting you out. Except, the old man nodded his head. Yes, that is rather cryptic. That was when she first started speaking, yet the man loaned him her ear, almost, in the same manner, Baki did whenever Gaara had something new he wanted to learn about the world. He titled his head slightly, pondering what she was wanting to know. Yeah, given what happened the other day. She finally stopped speaking and returned to the same position as before, yet her smile didn't return. She watched him carefully, listening to the Tsuchikage's words carefully. The look on Tsunade's face, she was obviously worried, yet. Apparently you've already struck up a friendship with my granddaughter. So, they are related. That was your conclusion and not the fact he's simply referring it as a friendship? Doesn't that strike you as odd? Should it? I do not know what I'm going to do with you. Though, he and Shukaku alike enjoyed the exasperated reactions of the Suna elders. The old man folded his arms in front of his chest. Well, if one can call it that. See, you're in trouble. Trouble? It's more if she's taking a shine to you, given that you've said some rather interesting things. Such as the fact you believe your older sister should be Cage. In fact, you believe she is stronger than you. Gaara's seafoam green eyes blinked. Can I ask a question? Tsunade. She worried her bottom lip, but her assistant was also showing quite a bit of anxiety regarding the situation. The old man waved his hand. Go ahead. Why do men underestimate the abilities of women? Gaara's question resulted in an answer of laughter, though he didn't find his question funny. The elders, he was sure they were far from pleased due to the sounds they were making. I see now why my granddaughter's taken a shine to you. So, nothing, as you realize one meeting couldn't possibly lead to peace between our two villages, yet everything. Using this as a chance to learn. For example, the old man became serious. This is so you can size me up with your own eyes, am I right? Yes, and what do you think? I can see why you're the Tsuchikage. The man laughed. Good answer. The man folded his fingers. That said, are you sure revealing the fact you're a Jinchuriki was such a good idea? Shukaku laughed at the groans coming from the nearby elders. Something told him he would get a mouthful when he got home, yet. You'd rather me be dishonest? Would you have revealed this if my granddaughter had not? It depends on whether the conversation came to that. It would have been a rather strange thing to bring up out of nowhere. Ah, so my granddaughter provided an opening for this to enter the conversation. Yes, you certainly are an interesting child, but wise for your years. The Tsuchikage stood up. We can't possibly discuss peace at this point in time, yet I must admit I do look forward to meeting with you again. Actually, while I'd love to meet you on the battlefield, I think I'd much rather have a battle of wits with you, young man. Oh, a twinkle appeared in the old man's eye. And I hope you rub off on my granddaughter. Why? This simply brought a laugh from the old man, who left, motioning for his granddaughter and the other to leave. Kurasuchi didn't seem pleased, yet neither were the Suna leaders. They attempted chewing him out, only for Tsunade to step in, shooing them away, explaining she wished to discuss with the young Cage how things went. Even her assistant left the room. She let out a sigh. I'm not sure I should have given you the advice I did. Lady Tsunade? You're playing with fire if the girl you've taken a shine to is the Tsuchikage's kin. But you'll be in a lot of trouble, both of you if anybody found out. I'm hoping. Lady Tsunade looked out the window. No, hoping I'm wrong isn't how I feel, not when I still feel the way I did when I found out you'd taken an interest in a girl, so all I can say is that if what I suspect is true, your relationship can't be public knowledge. Why'd I torture myself so? Oh? The sound of Kurasuchi's voice made Gaara's eyes open from where he stood leaning in the alleyway, waiting for her like planned. Do you really find being in a relationship with me torture? Gaara felt his cheeks blush slightly, his head turned away. I find not being able to tell Tamari or Kankuro torture, but also the thoughts of how they'll react if they ever found out. His seafoam-colored eyes drifted towards the clouds which floated in the small patch of sky visible from where they sat in the alleyway. He still remembered the day about half a year to a year ago when Kurasuchi leaned forward, attempting to place a kiss on his cheek. She'd definitely toned down things since the first meeting, respecting his personal space and moving the relationship slower than before. Shukaku, of course, prattled on about that, or she's got someone else on the side, something he'd become accustomed to, yet felt much better than Kurasuchi laughing at him when he asked her what his tailed beast actually meant. She'd said there was nobody else, yet he didn't really care. He didn't know if he should care if there was another guy, though Shukaku insisted he should. She'd just finished mentioning the fact she wished his insomnia didn't prevent him from taking a nap on the roof, which resulted in Shukao chiming in that she wants to sleep together. A blush spread across his cheek, remembering how he'd asked her if that was what she meant, but he revealed how in the back of his mind he worried that was what Lady Tsunade meant by taking things further. She found his question amusing and told him, no, that wouldn't count, yet didn't tell him what sleeping together actually was. He'd had a rather awkward conversation with Kankuro, which in turn led to a rather awkward situation where Temari yelled at their brother for talking to Gaara about that. She'd leaned in, planning on kissing him on the cheek, her fingers entwined with his when he heard Baki's voice. Lord Gaara, shoot! She'd pulled away at that moment, but Gaara moved to the ground below where his teacher waited for him, but when he stood, he saw the rather stern look on his teacher's face. Yes, where were you? Gaara's seafoam eyes blinked, but for some reason, he turned his head so he might look up at Kurasuchi. She didn't show any emotion on her face while he took a deep breath, turning back to Baki. He lifted his eyes from the ground, catching the look of horror on Baki's face. One not from the horror of what was going on in Konoha's hospital right now. She's a friend. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. I see. Baki turned, heading towards the hospital. Gaara turned, looking for Kurasuchi's face again, swallowing when he didn't see her at all. She did approach him later. He thought she'd chew him out for not admitting the relationship. It's not as if you could, but this means you know we can pass dates off as being just friends if we don't show any signs of our relationship being more than this. That's how the two found themselves in the alleyway, preparing to go on a date that would appear as nothing more than a lunch date between two friends. This didn't prevent her from entwining her fingers momentarily into his, which in turn made his entire body relax before leaning in, planning on kissing him on the cheek, sharing what was meant to be a private moment before doing the more public, friends-only, thing. The sound of someone saying his name made Kurasuchi stop, her lips hovering close to his cheek. His seafoam eyes snapped open, his mind taking in the sight of a shinobi around his own age dressed in bright orange and black clothing, his blonde hair sticking out everywhere while his blue eyes glinting merrily. He pointed his finger at Gaara, a rather large smile on his face. There you are, I just ran into Temari and Kankuro. The realization which didn't hit right away began sitting in, his jaw dropping while both Gaara and Kurasuchi froze, but from the way Kurasuchi breathed against his cheek, he knew she honestly wanted to kill Naruto for running into them while he instead didn't move, his mind taking in the fact Naruto mentioned he'd just run into Temari and Kankuro, which meant both of his siblings were nearby, but he could hear their voices while Kurasuchi's fingers tightened, nor could she pull away before his older brother hurried over, thanks to Naruto calling out Gaara's name. Gaara swallowed, closing his eyes, knowing everything in his now 16-year-old life was going to go to hell. What the hell? In truth, Gaara wasn't surprised when his older brother grabbed onto the front of his clothing, lifting slightly. He'd not seen that particular look on Kankuro's face since the Chunin exams. Back then, Kankuro doing such a thing was foolishly brave, given Gaara's old tendency for killing anything he deemed a threat to himself. Now, his brother's furry, it felt different. Kankuro appeared before Kurasuchi could loosen her grip, let alone let go of Gaara's hand. She'd not yet let go of his hand when Kankuro arrived in front of his younger brother, the touch abating only when Kankuro lifted Gaara up slightly, so their fingers no longer touched. Gaara swallowed, unsure of how he should handle the situation, having never dealt with his brother being this angry after he gained his sanity. Temari quickly appeared, her hands rising up while the look on her face. It was definitely that look she had on her face begging Gaara to head towards the tower sooner rather than later because she wasn't safe like he was. This time, though, she wasn't begging Gaara to stop. No, her attention was aimed at her other brother. Kankuro, don't. One of Kankuro's hands, the one closer to Temari, shot out palm side towards her. How could you, Gaara? Wait, what's going on? Temari's fake smile. Gaara wondered how long she'd keep that smile on her face when she did find out the truth. Naruto stood there with his hands behind his head, his mouth forming a pout. So Gaara got himself a girlfriend. Big deal. Gaara watched Temari's eyes widen, but Kankuro switched to grabbing his younger brother by the arm, dragging him away from the alleyway. We're leaving. He found himself a bit taken aback with the way Kankuro pulled him away, yet he watched Temari stiffen, her hand going to the fan which was on her back. Her actions made the people of Konoha look away from whatever they were doing. His mouth opened. Temari. She started taking a step forward, but he now couldn't see how Kurasuchi was reacting to the obvious threat of his older sister. Without flinching, he brought his sand out, bringing it between his sister and Kurasuchi, yet this didn't seem to stop his sister from moving forward. Kankuro, on the other hand, noticed, hissing out his younger brother's name. Gaara. Gaara paid his brother no mind and instead used his sand to gently tug at one of Temari's arms, pulling her away from the alleyway. Temari, please. He watched her turn, the look in her eyes revealing just how much she disliked the situation, which in turn made him look away, swallowing. The people of Konoha were definitely watching the scene in front of them. Kankuro cleared his throat. Temari, don't. Temari turned back so she now faced Naruto, who still stood there, his eyes narrowed. You know, you're causing a scene. Yeah, that Temari. Let's go, Kankuro mumbled. This isn't over. Temari called out towards Kurisuchi, though Gaara honestly wasn't sure she was in the alleyway anymore. He did know Lady Tsunade's likely worries were now playing out in front of him, meaning she'd be far from pleased when the news traveled back to her office, which it definitely would. She turned, hurrying over towards her brother, but grabbing onto Gaara's arm which Kankuro wasn't holding onto. Come on. Gaara opened his mouth, only to snap it back shut when Kankuro gave him a look saying it was better if Gaara said nothing, yet the way they pulled him along the street felt wrong. Because they're treating you like you should feel guilty for what you did. But I shouldn't feel guilty about my friendship with Kurisuchi. Friendship? That's not exactly what your relationship is. Isn't it? I mean, isn't this relationship a friendship that is more than other friendships? Which just tells me you don't have the word for it. I'm quite aware of the fact we're in a romantic relationship, so you're the one who's not understanding what I'm getting at. Gaara continued walking behind his siblings, glad that their movements slowed so they pulled a lot less, but they did both lead him back towards the place they were staying. His eyes darted down, wondering if they felt he should feel ashamed for, well, the way he felt. The door to their rented room slid shut and Kankuro let go while Temari continued holding onto his arm. More importantly, he heard his older brother start muttering under his breath. Kankuro. Gaara didn't like the way she snapped at their brother. Go get Baki. Gaara completely stiffened up, dreading yet another person he cared for being dragged into the mess. Kankuro muttered a few words under his breath. I'm aware he's in a meeting with the other elders discussing the latest meeting with Iwa. Don't you think this is important to what is going on? Fine. Kankuro left, leaving Gaara with his sister, whom he couldn't look in the eye. She led him over to one of the walls where she let go of his arm finally, letting him slide down to the ground, letting him pull his legs up to his chest, wrapping his arms around his knees. He didn't look her in the eye, but he could hear the displeasure in her voice. What the hell were you thinking, Gaara? He'd expected his silence, his inability to think of something right away, to be met with a lecture, yet Temari let him come up with an answer as if she was wanting one. He finally said, I can't help how I feel. What? I don't know why I feel the way I do. Gaara, that's my answer. You're only 16 for crying out loud. You can't possibly know how you feel or don't feel. You can't. 14. I was 14, she 15. She's a year older than you? That little. Temari. Gaara finally looked up at his sister, attempting to look her in the eyes, knowing full well she almost always melted, giving way to whatever his current whim was. She saw him look up, and instead of giving in lifted up a finger. Not this time. I've every right to be upset with you about this, Gaara. I told you. And I was trying to tell you that you can't tell whether you're actually in love with her, or if you're simply hormonally driven. I'm not following your point. Gaara rested his chin against his knees, suddenly realizing this would be a rather long conversation. Worse, he felt Temari's chakra flare back and forth, indicating a rather foul mood on her part, one he'd normally felt directed towards their brother. Eventually, she sat down in front of him, her tone of voice quite stern. I think I'll let Baki handle this one, but there is no way I'm letting you go anywhere anytime soon. Please tell me you've had a word with him, Temari. Hearing Kankuro's voice didn't make Gaara look up from where he sat in the room, his knees pulled towards his chest while his arms wrapped around. He'd spent a good chunk of time sitting there in silence as Temari paced back and forth fuming. She was yet to calm down. He heard her turn towards the voice. I decided Baki will handle talking to Gaara. I'm going out to cool my head. Gaara's head darted up, worry flickering through his mind. Wait, where are you going? His brother plopped down on one of the bamboo mats, his feet crossing in front of him so he could place a hand on either knee. You aren't in a position to judge the actions of anybody right now. Temari turned, the anger in her eyes evident to even him. What, you don't trust me? He thought about apologizing or saying that's not what he meant, but then realized neither were true. Except you were going to do something earlier, back when you found out. Gaara saw Temari's hands clenched while Kankuro's eyes widened. Neither were pleased with him nor pleased with his line of logic at this particular moment. He heard Baki's voice. Temari, I'm not the one you're supposed to be lecturing. Temari let out a deep breath, taking her fury out on the man who taught all three. We also don't need you making the situation worse. She responded by first looking away, then leaving through the window. Gaara wasn't sure if he needed to be worried. The young Cage heard Baki walking over while Kankuro watched the older man carefully. Methodically and gently, the man sat down in front of Gaara, yet slightly to the side so Gaara might still look at his older brother if the need arose. The man's hands rested on his knees, but the look on his face was definitely one of disappointment. I thought the two of you were only friends. Wait, you knew about this? Kankuro's voice went up an octave, indicating he was about to lose it. Baki holding his hand up made the young puppet master stop. Gaara, finish what you were going to say. We are friends, so that was not a lie. Gaara looked the man in the eye. However, I believe you're asking me why I left certain things out. Certain things out? His older brother shook his head, crossing his arms, muttering as he did so. Why? I'm from Suna, she's from Iwa. Do I really need to say any more? Gaara held up a hand. In other words, you. Baki held up his hand again. I wasn't asking you the reason why you didn't make the relationship public knowledge, but why you didn't trust your older siblings or myself. A few things clicked in Gaara's mind. For the same reason, we didn't tell Lady Tsunade we two things further after she found out. Denia. Wait. Kankuro's voice tightened and he pointed his finger at Gaara. Ability. The two of you've had already. Gaara watched Baki stand up, turning so he might lecture Kankuro for continuing to interrupt. Instead, Kankuro left, throwing his hands up into the air. I'm out of here. Gaara's brother disappeared before he could say, I meant continuing the relationship. Baki took a deep breath, closing his eyes, leaning back on the palms of his hands. For a few minutes, he remained silent, indicating the man was in deep thought. I guess I'll start off with the fact I sometimes forget that, despite the fact you are in many ways wise beyond your years, you are still young and still learning. I wish you'd have said something. Don't pretend you would have advised me to do anything but ignore the way I feel. The man's eyes opened so he might look Gaara in the eye. Then the reason wasn't just for deniability as you said, but because you feared we'd tell you no. Doesn't this mean you don't trust them? Gaara let his lips push together. It's still not because I didn't trust you three. What you mean is the reason you didn't tell us has nothing to do with us telling others regarding the relationship. Yet you definitely knew the three of us wouldn't be pleased. Despite this, you still continued with the relationship. Guilt washed over him, his arms tightening around his knees, his eyes lowering so he might look at the ground instead of looking Baki in the eye. He struggled in figuring out the right way to respond. Something told him there was no right way. Baki let out a sigh. Gaara, how long has this relationship been going on? Since we first met. Wait, you started, whatever you've been doing. Baki drew in a sharp breath. What have the two of you been doing? While I'm grateful you've said the two of you haven't yet had with each other, I still find myself worried. I mean, do you even know what that is? Temari lost it with Kankuro when he explained to me what sleeping with someone means. Gaara looked at the ground, his voice lowering. Kurasuchi said taking naps on the roof didn't count as that. Wait, not that we can do that with my insomnia. Gaara took a deep breath. Hand-holding. He said the next word hesitantly. Kissing, mostly on the cheek. Cloud-watching. Eating meals together. Talking about books we like. Listening to her complain about how her grandfather annoys her. Telling her about how amazing Kankuro and Temari are. The corners of his mouth twisted up slightly. I told her Temari should have been cage before she learned I was the cage. He paused, finally looking Baki in the eye again. I know I shouldn't feel good saying those things, given the fact I know I've created a major political mess with all of this. He watched Baki's facial features soften, his mouth opening slightly. I can't help the fact I feel happy around her, but... Gaara swallowed, letting out a deep breath. She didn't judge me for being a Jinchuriki. Apparently, in Iwa, things are different regarding that. No matter how far I've come, I'm still judged back in Suna for being the Junchuriki of Shukaku, but our enemies don't treat me that way. Baki remained silent, definitely carefully taking in his words. The man closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. I'm glad you understand this is a definite political mess. To say the elders, who I happened to be with when Kankuro barged in, were far from pleased, that is a definite understatement. Things do need to be done to rectify this. Do you understand? Gaara looked at his hands but firmly stated, I don't want to end this relationship. You might not have a choice. Hearing the man who taught him, even stepped in after the previous case cage died where each of the siblings needed him too, it hurt. However, I'm not going to be the one to make you, nor will I let Temari and Kankuro stop you either. I can't, though, do anything about the rest of Suna, or for that matter the people of Iwa. Thank you. I'm not finished. Baki stood up. You and I are going to go and see the Tsuchikage tonight, as chances are this matter has already reached his ears. That's going to be our first step of making things right, but I'll intercede on your behalf as your legal guardian as I can. Particularly since your older siblings were so inclined on not being here right now, though to be honest, I'd rather both of them not be there making things worse. What the hell were you thinking? From outside of the place the shinobi from Iwa were staying in Konoha. Gaara was quite able to hear the sound of the Tsuchikage speaking rather loudly to whom they assumed was his granddaughter. Gaara found himself looking up at Baki, feeling slightly concerned regarding the tone of voice, wondering if they should interfere. His teacher seemed just as taken aback by what was going on. I told you, I like him. That's not what I meant, and you know it. The old man's voice definitely could be heard outside because of how loud it was. But the fact they heard Kurisuchi's without the strain of yelling on the vocal cords meant a window was likely left open. Baki let out a sigh, before knocking on the door which resulted in the old man opening the door, his anger evident. What? Everyone can hear you on the street. Well, I can't expect you to be angry with this particular situation given the fact it doesn't involve your family. May we come in and speak? Baki asked politely. His eyes drifted. And you may want to close that window. It isn't as if the whole village doesn't know. A village which isn't any of ours. He waved them in, but his voice calmed slightly. He nodded to the young man Gaara recognized as the person who came and fetched her the first day they met. The said person walked over to the window and closed the device. Well, at least someone is being reasonable regarding this situation. I don't know what I've done wrong. It's a political mess. The Tsuchikage turned, looking Gaara in the eye, crossing his arms across his chest. And you? He pointed a finger at Gaara. What do you have to say for yourself? I'm wishing to apologize. He watched the expressions on everyone's faces. While there were others from Iwa for the latest meeting, only these three were at the quarters provided by Lady Tsunade. Kurisuchi's companion glared at him. Yet Kurisuchi seemed far from pleased, yet he couldn't read why. One of the Tsuchikage's eyebrows shot up. Oh? For not asking my permission. No. For going behind your back. For going behind everyone's back. The man turned away, walking over to the small table in the middle of their room where a tea set was waiting. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. Like always, you have more common sense than my granddaughter. Gaara's eyes blinked. Isn't that a bit harsh? Come, sit, the both of you. The old man sat down at the table, motioning for Baki and Gaara to sit at the other table. Gaara followed suit and Baki sat down next to him. Kurisuchi sulked over by the wall while her companion continued to glare. At least she's not glaring at me anymore, but I can't think she's pleased with her grandfather. You defend my granddaughter, I see. She doesn't need me to defend her. Well, I'm glad you've quite a bit of faith in her. The old man started pouring cups of tea. But, he held up a finger. My granddaughter is hot-headed. She still needs to learn to control that, and at times that gets her in trouble. I can't say I don't get into my fair share of trouble myself. The Tsuchikage looked at Baki now. Of course, why are you here? The case cage is definitely capable of acting on his own, speaking for himself. I'm acting in the capacity of his legal guardian due to his young age, particularly since his siblings aren't available. Let me guess, they acted in a hot-headed manner? Kankuro definitely. Of course, he's also known for not acting with his head even when he's cool-headed. Gaara piped up, his eyes on his hand. Temari though. She's gone into protective older sister mode and needs a bit of time to process things. Truth is, I don't think she suspected her youngest brother dating at all. It was only a few years ago he finally started letting others touch him. The Tsuchikage nodded his head. Because he's a Jinchuriki. How long? We in Iwa have discovered the younger they are, the more of a struggle they have. Being that children lack the maturity adults have, yet, on the other hand, putting them into an older person means they lose in power. Wait, Kurosaki didn't tell you? She told you I was a Jinchuriki that day at the meeting. Gaara looked at her. She'd finally turned, but her facial features softened slightly. No, she told me that you were a Jinchuriki because she knew that would impress me. Honestly, there is no age that would surprise me. I'm not so sure about that. Baki took a deep breath. The tailed beast was sealed into Gaara before he was born. It resulted in the death of his mother. The Tsuchikage looked up, looking Gaara in the eye, surprise evident, yet he also saw Kurotsuchi's companion stop glaring at him, his jaw dropping in shock. The man stopped moving the tea set around. Well, I must admit that one does surprise me. Proves, even more, your father was a fool. I think his intentions were to protect the village. Yes, well, Rasa wasn't very rash in the things he did. He did some things which raised major questions regarding his capabilities. I wasn't defending him. Honestly, I'm not sure what to think of my father. To me, he was an enigma, someone I never really got the chance to understand. Which is an honest pity, perhaps. Or perhaps a blessing. I don't know your personal circumstances, but I will tell you this from one cage or another, that if one is incapable of protecting their family when they are able to do so, they are definitely not capable of running a village. The elders walked all over him, so it is far luckier they pressured your father into doing what he did. I don't know. I've been told the whole purpose of me being born was as a form of sacrifice, but my mother was sacrificed as well. Well, I can't honestly talk about your father's actions as he's no longer around. You can't really know what he was or wasn't thinking unless he tells you, or he wrote it down somewhere. You can only otherwise infer things. However, we can talk about your actions, which is why the two of you are here, but the ramifications of what has occurred, not to mention what ramifications will be had going forward. I understand this is a political mess. Did you understand this before you started dating? The Tsuchikage's question honestly wasn't one Gaara knew how to answer. Well, if you did, why did either of you not come to myself or? The Tsuchikage nodded his head towards Baki. Legal guardian, we could have helped. Gaara let his lips push together slightly. I didn't want to trouble anyone. I see. Trying to take care of the family, at least in the best way someone as young as yourself possibly could. Mind you, I said what a cage is or isn't capable of. The Tsuchikage let out a sigh. There are times when sacrifices are appropriate, such as if one has to make a weighty moral choice. I guess perhaps in your father's mind it was framed in that manner. The sun started setting outside of the window, but the Tsuchikage took a sip of the tea, before handing the first cup to Gaara. Here, as you can see, not poisoned. Thank you. Continuing this conversation, you should have come to us. There is a chance we could have actually figured out something that you kids could not. I was under the impression this was the best choice from some things Lady Tsunade said. Gaara watched the man look up, handing another cup to Baki. What advice? That if we did continue it should be better people didn't know. Well, while Lady Tsunade is wise, I wouldn't consider her the best person to get advice from regarding romance matters. Of course, I must admit I don't know what kind of advice to give, yet I don't see why I should stand in the way. I'm still hoping you'll rub off on my granddaughter one day. For some reason that seems a bit harsh. Gaara watched Kurosatchi's mouth twisted in annoyance, yet there was a definite smile on her face. Hold on. Kurosatchi's companion spoke up. Are you sure, Tsuchikage? It isn't as if they're doing anything so far which would cause any kind of concern, but... The man held a twinkle in his eye, one his granddaughter definitely inherited. I've my reasons, Akatsuchi. Yes, Lord Tsuchikage. The Tsuchikage looked at the window. It's late, so I invite the two of you to stay the night. Gaara opened his mouth. I don't. We'll be glad to accept the invitation, Lord Tsuchikage. Baki bowed. Though the case cage does suffer from insomnia. No need to worry about that. You and I can stay up discussing non-political matters while Akatsuchi supervises those two in the other room. I think my granddaughter is a bit relieved this is known, though I will Kurotsuchi still be thinking of a punishment for you not telling me. Kurotsuchi sighed. You're so lucky you're a cage and thus won't be punished. Yeah, well I'm stuck babysitting the two. Akatsuchi's comment made her elbow him in the ribs, her mouth twisting into a frown. Seriously. Gaara watched Baki and the Tsuchikage talking through the night from the other side of the room about things such as social customs from various hidden villages, though the Tsuchikage seemed more amused at testing Baki's knowledge of the world, although Gaara didn't know if Baki sensed this or not. Akatsuchi sat in a corner of their room next to the screens which normally separated the two rooms while Kurasuchi leaned up against Gaara's side, asleep. Much to Gaara's amusement, Akatsuchi kept struggling with staying awake, in an attempt at being serious regarding the task assigned to him by the Tsuchikage. In the back of his mind, he wondered what Kankuro and Tamari were getting up to, yet hoped they returned to the room and got a good night's sleep. A knock on the Tsuchikage's door made everything pause, rousing Kurasuchi from her sleep. He heard a yawn in his ear, then felt her stretch out near him while everyone else looked towards the door. Akatsuchi got up to answer the door, unlike the day before, making Gaara wonder if the Tsuchikage expected him to show, although not with a legal guardian. Listening to the conversation from the night before, the Tsuchikage seemed quite amused regarding the relationship between Baki, Gaara and his siblings, another topic of conversation. The door opened. "I'm so sorry Lord Tsuchikage, but..." The person paused. "Wait, one of the Suna shinobi is here. The cage is here as well. We've been having a chat regarding a certain matter. You should treat the matter more seriously." "Why would you think I'm not?" Gaara couldn't see the man's face, but he imagined the look on his face was similar to what he'd seen when he arrived. Kurasuchi moved away slightly. He heard the person let out a sigh. "May I please approach the cage? I think this is something I need to say to his face. If you have issues with what's been going on." "No, it's about something which occurred during the night." Gaara's blood chilled, but he could also feel Shukaku's agitation. He felt Kurasuchi reach out and briefly squeeze his shoulder. The Tsuchikage watched the person carefully. "You can approach, yet if you do anything inappropriate, note that I won't hesitate in finding an appropriate punishment." The shinobi from Iwa came forward, then bowed low to the ground. "I apologize for this Lord Cage, but we received word someone attacked your sister during the night. She is currently in surgery with Lady Tsunade, but this is not how you should be hearing the news." He honestly felt numb, unsure what to do, yet his world felt like it was breaking apart. Tamari held the family unit together. It helped him in so many social things he didn't understand, not to mention things between them. He didn't want it ending that way. The Tsuchikage took a deep breath, turning and looking into the room. "Kurasuchi, Akatsuchi, would you please escort the Lord Cage to Konoha's hospital? Baki and I will look into this matter, getting in touch with whoever is in charge while Lady Tsunade is attempting to save the life of the Lord Cage's sister. Oh, and don't blame yourself Lord Cage, this is not your fault." Gaara stood, his mind still processing, but then he realized something. "Wait, Kankuro." Baki looked at him. "We'll also look for your brother, making sure he doesn't do anything rash." He watched them leave, the Iwa shinobi following right behind them. Kurasuchi reached out and grabbed his sleeve. "Come on." Akatsuchi cleared his voice. "So, you're probably already aware of the fact I don't like you." "Akatsuchi." Kurasuchi walked forward, bringing the side of her hand against the side of his head as she was shorter than him. "That's inappropriate. I was just wanting to say I'm sorry for what happened." Akatsuchi looked away. "Let's go. And I've got the right to be uncomfortable with this relationship. He's from Suna after all. And I'm from Iwa. That's not the same thing. It is if you're from Suna, you moron." She turned, then held out her hand, trying to put a smile on her face as if she was trying to make him feel better. "Come on. You need to be where you can receive news. Shouldn't I be out looking for who did this? Honestly, I agree with you, but knowing my grandfather, he'd come up with some kind of knowledgeable reason why. Plus, your sensei agreed to this." He took her hand, yet he didn't know what happened between when they left the place the Tsuchikage was staying in Konoha and arriving outside of the room where Tamari was undergoing surgery. He sat there, holding Kurasuchi's hand, his entire body numb. "This is why a shinobi is supposed to feel nothing. I believe you're correct, yet you are also right that caring about people is a strength. I learned that from you. I care about you. I can't understand what you're going through. The only thing I can do is not be my usual self, though that will be difficult." Gaara swallowed, closing his eyes, wishing with all of his heart Tamari would be okay. He took a deep breath, mentally processing what was going on. "Gaara?" His eyes snapped open, his mouth opened slightly upon seeing the familiar face. The person standing in front of him was the young man who forfeited against Tamari during the Chunin exams, yet he was the only one to make the rank of Chunin. His eyes opened and closed, slowly taking in Shikamaru's presence. Shikamaru let out a sigh. "Okay, I'm not going to ask what's going on between the two of you. None of my business, but does Tamari know? For saying it is none of your business, you seem to be making it your business, Kurisuchi said from beside Gaara. Shikamaru let out a sigh. What a drag. Look, I'm just curious if Tamari knows. I can't imagine she'd take something then. Possibly a slight change in Gaara's facial features alerted him to the answer. In fact, Gaara found Shikamaru one of the few people capable of easily reading him, something he always marveled at. She does know. I mean, Shikamaru glanced at the room for surgery. Well, this really sucks. I'm sure she'll come around. She's just worried about you. He turned, smiling. Also, if anyone can save her, it's Lady Tsunade or Sakura, right? Gaara knew he was right, yet this didn't make him feel better. This is my fault. What happened to Tamari is my fault. In the back of his mind he knew he shouldn't blame himself for what happened, yet what happened, the fact she was attacked, Gaara couldn't shake the fact this happened right after his relationship with Kurisuchi became public knowledge thanks to Uzumaki. His mind couldn't help but make the connection between the two events, yet. The Tsuchikage said it's not your fault, but I'm sure others would say the same thing. Yet you can't say this yourself. Honestly, I don't get this kind of thing any more than you do. I know I wouldn't blame myself in your shoes, but then I don't have any siblings. Well, I guess you might call the other tailed beasts my siblings, yet I don't think that counts as I couldn't care if anything happened to them, not to mention I think they're too different for them to be considered my siblings. Also, you know I'm not the best person to take advice from, so I think I'll stick to quoting the advice of others I know to be wiser than I. Thank you for trying to be helpful, though I'm not sure how helpful you are. Gaara. Kankuro's voice drew Gaara out of his deep thoughts, making him look up at his older brother. He swallowed, reading how his brother's facial features twisted in anger. He felt the feeling of Kurisuchi's fingers mingling with his own as she held his hand, while also feeling the warmth of her body. The feeling, he honestly found her presence comforting. Something about Kankuro's poster made Gaara think he wasn't comfortable with Kurisuchi's presence. Are you an idiot? Gaara's seafoam green eyes shifted away from his brother, looking for Baki. He didn't see their sensei anywhere nearby. Where is sensei? Sensei? I've not seen him since last night. I don't know what the hell that has to do with anything. Then how did you find out? About Tamari? That's my question. One of ours. One of the elders told me, but if I'd known one of the shinobi who's to blame was here. Are you serious? Accusing Kurisuchi like that? Akatsuchi spoke up, only to flinch when Gaara guessed he received a glare from Kurisuchi. Kurisuchi had nothing to do with what happened to Tamari. Hell, you don't know that. You can't possibly know that. Gaara's eyes blinked. Except I know where she was last night. He heard his brother let out a string of curses. Kankuro's eyes glued on Kurisuchi. Seriously, Gaara, you were with her last night. Don't you even understand what kind of political mess your relationship is going to cause? It's got to end, you can't. Kankuro shook his head. This can't go on. Gaara moved his hand so he no longer touched Kurisuchi's hand. That's why Baki and I spoke with the Tsuchikage last night. He watched Kankuro's eyes widen. Gaara, what have you done? No, I get you. You're still a kid, but Baki? Stop acting like this is some kind of betrayal. Isn't it? Isn't it a betrayal to the… Kankuro looked at Kurisuchi. Gaara, I'd like to continue this conversation in private. Gaara heard Kurisuchi stand up, watching her do so out of the corner of her eye. I'll respect that, for now. He turned, watching her leave along with Akatsuchi, before turning back to Kankuro. Say what you want to say, but keep it down. You don't need to be bothering Lady Tsunade in the surgery. Kankuro took a deep breath. I can't believe Baki went behind Tamari and my back but is fully supportive of your relationship with this girl. The Tsuchikage is as well. Gaara, don't you realize he's likely got alternative motives to all of this? How do you know they weren't planning this all out? For what reason? How should I know? You and Tamari are the brains in the family. Kankuro took a deep breath. I don't approve of this. I never will, nor will Tamari. If she makes it out of surgery. Hell, you need to get your priorities straight, sitting here with that girl. Gaara's mouth twisted into a frown. I don't understand. What do you mean you don't understand? Isn't it bloody obvious? No, I don't understand why you take issue with her being here. Gaara looked his brother in the eye. After all, she was simply here for me. Because you don't bring some girl who a person doesn't approve of to the hospital with you like this. You just don't. The door of the surgery opened, making both Gaara and Kankuro look up. but Kankuro turned his head, looking right at the door. Lady Tsunade stepped out, looking rather exhausted, her eyes narrowed. I guess I'll start with telling you it is up to Tamari now whether she pulls through or not, but my assistant is arranging for her to be taken to one of the rooms to hopefully recover. She then took a deep breath, before proceeding to yell at the two of them. What the hell were the two of you thinking, having an argument outside of the surgery? Kankuro's eyes blinked. We are going to my office now to discuss this rather than continuing this conversation in a place which will interfere with the recovery of my patient, but I expect the two of you to be on better behavior. Gaara wasn't sure what he'd done wrong, but stood up, figuring Lady Tsunade would, in fact, tell him what he'd done wrong. He heard Kankuro stammer, but then looked his brother in the eye. Come on, you don't want to make her even angrier. I know. Kankuro then muttered something Gaara sure was, she's worse than Tamari. They arrived in the office, where Lady Tsunade placed herself behind her desk, standing with her hands on the desktop. Alright, tell me what the two of you were arguing about? Yeah, well, you should know. Apparently, you knew they were dating. So, then the rumors running around the village are true? You did continue a relationship with her despite our conversation. That was one implication of what you said. Don't twist my words around, mister. Lady Tsunade pointed at Gaara. I told you I had my worries regarding the relationship turning into a political mess, but on the other hand I also wanted you to be happy, so I had majorly mixed feelings. And that was the other implication I took from what you said. Yeah, sorry, but I got the same implications as Gaara. Kankuro folded his arms across his chest. It's no wonder he royally fucked up. No, you're the one who's royally fucked up. You should be supporting your brother in this, as this is just going to become an even bigger mess, given the fact someone using fire abilities is the one who attacked Tamari. This is what I was trying to tell you, Gaara. Iwa is behind this. That's not what you were trying to tell me. You were trying to blame Kurasuchi specifically, but I told you. Baki and I were speaking with the Tsuchikage last night, but she and that other person were there. Yeah, but someone else from Iwa. Or, as Gaara is trying to tell you, someone not from Iwa may have tried to manipulate things to make people think Iwa is to blame. You know this would be a prime opportunity for someone from Suna to make a political move against you. Gaara's eyes blinked. Actually, I wasn't thinking that. Yeah, well, the two of you were arguing about this outside. He's the one who brought that girl there. The only reason she wasn't there when you came out was so Gaara and I could talk in private. Well, what does Gaara have to say about that? The Tsuchikage had Kurasuchi and the other shinobi escort me to Konoha's hospital while he and Baki spoke with whoever you'd left in charge. Sounds like nothing was going wrong, Kankuro. They were sitting there despite the fact Tamari and I don't approve of the relationship. She wasn't welcome. Lady Tsunade let out a sigh. Look, you have things to work out. You can't say though what he did wasn't proper etiquette when you've not yet talked these things out and it's been less than 24 hours. You also can't speak for Tamari either. Yeah, well, I can speak for myself and say I was majorly offended, but I'm actually going to spend my time doing something useful and looking for whoever did this to Tamari. Kankuro turned on his heels despite the fact Gaara knew in the back of his mind this was likely to lead to trouble. Don't let him cool his head off. That's what he was supposed to be doing the night before. Could things get any worse? Gaara knew better than to ask himself such questions. A few others, including Tamari and Kankuro, called it jinxing oneself, yet the thought came unbidden after Kankuro left in search of whoever harmed Tamari, putting her in grave need of healing. It was the thought which came right after the thought of what Kankuro should have been doing the night before. He stood there, listening to Lady Tsunade's advice of letting his older brother cool off when her office was intruded upon by the elders of Suna. Lord Casecage, we heard you were here. And I didn't invite you in, nor do I suspect anyone else here in Konoha. Lady Tsunade narrowed her eyes, rather unimpressed with how lacking in proper etiquette the elders of Suna were, yet in the back of his mind Gaara, despite knowing he really shouldn't, found some kind of amusement in the fact certain elders lectured him on proper etiquette, yet they faltered many times as they did just now. Is this about the attack on my sister? You do realize that this has to do with consorting with the Iwa village. They saw us as soft, particularly since you took up having relations with that hussy. I'm not sure they should speak about someone being disrespectful. I don't think that is what they meant. What did they? Gaara flipped the switch on the thought rather quickly. Is this something I need to ask my siblings or is it something you want me to ask them about because it will cause you some kind of amusement? At this point in time you simply need to know they are insulting your girlfriend, but this will become a real mess before things are done. I am not going to enjoy it, so I'll go to sleep now. Which was a bit frustrating given the fact Shukaku was the apparent reason behind Gaara's insomnia. Are you even paying attention to what we're saying, Lord Cage? That girl, the one who's been shagging. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Lady Tsunade folded her arms across her ample chest, her eyes glaring daggers into the elder's eyes. This is between us and the Lord Cage. This involves my village as the attack occurred in my village, but we are definitely looking into the matter. I do not appreciate the fact you've already jumped to conclusions. The girl, that hussy. Let's start this off by not calling any woman that, particularly in front of a young impressionable young man who, despite the fact he isn't inclined to use that kind of language, will be curious regarding what it means. Let's move on to the fact you're accusing her of that word, and your own cage of their relationship having gone in that direction. But having spoken with Gaara regarding the subject of romantic relationships, I'd suggested he not take any relationship to that point. Oh, that's what it means. Why is it that females get a lot of flack for UAL activities while men do not? Because they're the ones who get pregnant. Yes, but it takes two for a child to be created, so both should be held accountable. The problem is, everyone knows who the mother is, but they can question who the father is all they want. That's rather unfair. Lord Cage, are you even paying any attention to us? I guess I'll start off by saying I know that it couldn't have been her who attacked Tamari the night before. Good lord. Please tell me you didn't rendezvous with this charlatan. I'd appreciate it if you'd stop calling her names. You're supposed to be elders of the council, but name calling I've been told is something children do. I wouldn't know as I didn't interact with others much as a child. The man's face twisted, swallowing. That girl, you had a rendezvous last night despite the fact your brother and sister both put forth their dissatisfaction regarding the relationship, yet knowing none of us in Suna would approve? Oh, I don't know. We're aware of the fact you've gained a strong following among the youth of our village, but that will not I guarantee you stand when they find out you've taken up with a girl from Iwa. Anyways, the other elder finally spoke. While it might be true that you were able to confirm her alibi, the same cannot be said about the Tsuchikage and his other assistant, who are also known for their fire abilities. Except I can be sure, but if you'd let me finish I would have told you as much. You were in the audience of the Tsuchikage without a guardian. Baki was there, but as I was going to say, I know of one person in Suna who's already decided they will support me. This can't possibly work out. The second shook his head. Gaara noticed the first, who at first seemed so sure of himself, now remained silent. Something felt off, yet something always felt off regarding the elders, as they sought to control him, use him as a pawn because of his young age. Only because certain people are pig-headed like yourselves. Lady Tsunade. Gaara glanced over at the woman, surprised she was speaking out, but then again, the elders barged into her office without asking. You really shouldn't have barged into her office without permission. You'd think elders would be aware of getting on her bad side, correct? Gaara watched the two men squirm. The second, finally calmed, turning towards Lady Tsunade. You know very well this can't work out, that it is a political nightmare. That's why we kept it secret. That is exactly the kind of response I'd expect from a child. The first elder finally regained his composure, glaring at Gaara. As such, this relationship will cease at once. And yes, Lord Gaara, we do have the authority to stop this relationship but go above any of your legal guardians' heads. You are of the cage line, which means that you're trying to prevent history from repeating itself. Lady Tsunade glared at the man. As I recollect, there was a cage who did marry a certain someone against everyone's wishes. He wasn't cage yet, which, you'd think given the fact the previous cage was his father that said cage would have been able to do something, yet right now you're trying to argue that your council has a power it definitely does not. Tsunade continued glaring at the men. This is about the best interests of our Lord Cage and the cage line. Isn't he a bit young for you to be concerned about him not marrying? That's when you should interfere. We have a major difference in opinion here, Lady Tsunade, but you are not, may I remind you, from our village. We will, the rest of the council, be seeking another arrangement for our young cage in regard to marriage, but the other elders will be on our side. The elder then looked Gaara in the eye. Of course, the one I suspect won't easily be removed. Have a good day. The second man bowed. Sorry, you really shouldn't have brought that up with him. He's still irritated with the political mess which arose from that particular incident. Gaara watched them leave, then opened his mouth, clearing his throat. What did they mean, that incident? Oh, the incident with your father and mother? Father didn't love mother. Gaara looked at the ground. She was a sacrifice. Lady Tsunade let out a deep breath. I admit, I don't know the specifics, but if you think about it, I don't think you do either. I mean, certain council elders wanted your father to fail, yet he never once felt as if he could stand up to them. I thought you'd have figured that out by now, from your conversations with the Tsuchikage. Gaara looked at the ground. The Tsuchikage considered my father a fool, but in some ways, I do as well. I do think he honestly wanted to protect the village. That is not a lie. But what, Gaara, is a lie? It's an untruth. That's not what I meant. I meant what in your life is a truth or a lie. The fact Temari and Kankuro, even that sensei of yours love you isn't a lie, but if your parents married against the council wishes, doesn't that mean this idea of yours that they didn't love each other was a lie? A rebellious phase? Gaara's mind, of course, drifted towards his older brother, thinking his brother would do something rash like that. Your father and brother aren't the same person. But isn't he where Kankuro gets his inability to act rashly from? Perhaps you should think of your father as a person who does indeed act in rash manners when he is emotionally charged. What would you think he would do, if pushed into a corner like Kankuro is now? Gaara swallowed. I need to go after my brother. His hands clenched. I know I should be there for Temari, but she'd kill me, not literally if I let him get into trouble. He saw the way Tsunade let out a deep breath. I will contemplate what you just said, but first, I must find Kankuro. How the hell am I supposed to find my brother? How the hell should I know the answer to that? Shukaku was, like usual, completely useless in the given situation. The situations he was actually useful for tended to be rather weird ones, and even then Gaara wasn't sure he was useful. He took to the roofs of Konoha searching for his wayward brother, definitely wishing his older brother was actually acting like an older brother, although he wasn't sure what that really truly meant, being that he'd only started accepting Kankuro as his older brother a few years ago. In the back of his mind, he knew Kankuro was always wanting to be that older brother for him, yet that was likely one of the last things on his brother's mind. He let out a sigh. Finding things a major drag? Gaara turned and looked at Shikamaru, who rubbed the back of his head. Yes, you? Saying what a drag would definitely be apt right now. Lady Tsunade said you were looking for your older brother, but told me to help you out. I'm not sure where to even begin. Well, what are his motivations? Motivations? Gaara focused on the skyline. He's not thinking straight. Yeah, well, I'd argue your brother doesn't normally think straight. Can you blame him? I mean, having a younger brother like myself, I think that would put anyone on edge. Well, there is that. My point is, when your brother doesn't think straight, he focuses in on something. What is he focusing in on? Gaara continued looking at the sky, not wanting to really think about the answer. Eventually, he did answer, because it needed answering. He's focused on the group from Iwa. Specifically, he's focused not on the Tsuchikage, his granddaughter, or the Tsuchikage's other assistant because he knows I was with them last night along with Baki. So he's likely focused on the others from Iwa. Possibly. Except I don't know where the others from Iwa are. Well, thankfully, neither does Kankuro, though. The Tsuchikage is likely to know where they are, but if Kankuro can find him, then he's going to do something really stupid. Gaara started moving forward. Yes, but where is the Tsuchikage? He's with our teacher, but they were working with your Konoha shinobi, or at least coordinating with them. Yeah, I would actually know where that is. Shikamaru took a deep breath. That would be our place, given the fact it was my father who was put in charge of that group. Follow me. Gaara stared at Shikamaru, yet didn't say anything. What, don't you often say your father is a lazy bum? When my mother's not lit a fire under his butt, or the Hokage for that matter, that is definitely a correct statement. A grin spread across Shikamaru's face, but Gaara found himself following the other young man. He'd never been out to the Nara place before, yet he found the place tranquil. I think I found a new place to visit. Well, don't go stepping into the forest without permission. Only my clan is allowed to do so without permission. There is a deer herd here which we care for, but we use their antlers for certain medicines. Perhaps when things are not so crazy, you could show me these creatures. They sound like they are of the gentle sort. Yes, well, Shikamaru let out a laugh. You would think of that first, wouldn't you? Though, I do have to admit they definitely are. If you're a member of the Nara clan, that is. They don't let anyone who's not in the clan near them. They'll attack if said person's not been given permission. I just want to see them. With a job like that, I think I understand more why you're as laid back as you are. The permission must come in handy if you add someone from outside to the clan, say through marriage. You're weird. Shikamaru stopped in front of a building on the edge of the forest. Well, here we are. And now that I think of it, let's hope your brother isn't dumb enough to venture into the forest without permission because of this whole mess. He'd keep to the treetops. Well, there is that, but it's still dumb if he does end up on the ground. Agreed. They entered the building. A man who looked like Shikamaru looked up. One major difference lay in the parallel scars on the right side of his face, yet it was obvious the two were father and son. He looked up from the table where he discussed certain matters with the Tsuchikage and Baki. Ah, Lord Casecage. Baki looked up. Lord Gaara, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be with Lady Tamari? Kankuro is being an idiot, but I doubt she'd appreciate me letting him run amok right now. Regarding that, he's got it into his head that the shinobi from Iwa are to blame. Didn't you tell him you and I were with them the night before? Baki's eyes closed, but he pinched the bridge of his nose in the normal fashion which indicated the man was frustrated with something one of the siblings did. This time, it was Kankuro. In fact, most of the time it was Kankuro, given Gaara's older brother's proclivity regarding practical jokes. The times Gaara decided to pull a practical joke were instead met with the man staring at him, his jaw slack, shocked at Gaara's uncharacteristic behavior. Okay, Shikamaru's father slammed his palm into his hand. We may not be able to lay a trap just yet for the person who perpetrated the crime against your sister, but we could definitely set a trap for your brother. One of Shikamaru's eyebrows shot up. Hey, Dad, do you even hear yourself and how wrong that sounds? Well, it's the best way to keep him out of trouble but in turn keep him out of our hair. If he's after shinobi from Iwa, then we gather them all in the same place, but have Gaara and you watch over the group until your brother shows up and then it's the job of you two to knock some sense into him, right? You know, I think that's a wonderful idea, the Tsuchikage said, and I can arrange for it. Baki let out a sigh, his eyes looking up at the ceiling, almost as if hoping the world would finally have mercy on him. Gaara couldn't remember who taught him that particular phrase, yet it seemed quite apt in describing how his teacher felt. Seriously, what a drag. Hey, that's my line. Gaara definitely found the exchange between Kurasuchi and Shikamaru amusing. She'd insisted on joining them in watching for his brother, which was indeed turning out to be a rather boring task, making him wish he was instead at Temari's side where he belonged. Of course, Kankuro belonged there as well, something he planned on rectifying with this trap. Wow, I didn't ever expect to meet someone as laid back as Shikamaru. This comment came from one of Shikamaru's teammates, who joined them, waiting for some kind of sign that Kankuro was nearby. Hey, not cool Ino. Shikamaru's other teammate looked right at both Gaara and Kurasuchi as if contemplating something, but he finally said something as well. So, you two really are dating? Oh, come on Choji. This is Gaara we're talking about. Gaara, excuse me? Kurasuchi looked up from the railing she leaned against, her eyes focused on Ino. What is that supposed to mean? You aren't saying. I wasn't saying anything. Ino held up her hands in defense. Choji on the other hand chuckled. What she's getting at is Gaara's kind of the last person we'd expect to be dating someone. It really wasn't a bad thing, just that you might say Gaara's rather shy around people when he first gets to know him. Wow, that's not my experience with him at all. You've got to be kidding me. Ino gave that look which Gaara knew meant she was baffled. Apparently, there were a lot of things that baffled her. A lot of things baffled him regarding life, yet unlike Ino, it rarely if ever showed on his face except for, as some like Shikamaru described it, as a look which was obviously curious about the world around him. Ino's look, there didn't seem to be any kind of curiosity, just bafflement. I'm not. We had a pretty interesting conversation. With Gaara? Kurasuchi started the conversation and I followed suit. Okay, that honestly makes a lot more sense, though I can't help but think that a rather long conversation with Mr. Silent over there would turn awkward. It was. Gaara wouldn't deny the fact. Kurasuchi shrugged her shoulders. A lot of our conversations are awkward. Oh, God. Please tell me the two of you haven't had yet. No. He said the words with Kurasuchi. Ino. Shikamaru was obviously not pleased with where the conversation headed, but his cheeks flushed. Seriously. Not my fault you. Shut up, Ino. Yeah, Choji shook his head. We really shouldn't talk about that in front of her brother. It's not at all true, but Tamari would say the same. Sure. Kurasuchi looked at him. Are you the one Gaara's older sister fought in the Chunin exams? Because if so, I think Gaara's already got the two of you figured out. Shikamaru facepalmed. Seriously. There is nothing going on between me and Tamari. I'm simply her legion when she's here in the village. Nothing more. Kurasuchi turned and looked Ino in the eye. By the way, are you some kind of pervert? Say what? Where did that come from? You were rather upfront asking us whether we had or not. You two were the ones who said the conversation turned awkward. How could I not jump to such conclusions? As I asked, are you some kind of pervert? Gaara, I really don't like your girlfriend, but… Shikamaru held up his hand, sensing what Gaara did. Kankuro, or somebody is near. Gaara took a deep breath, his eyes looking around for his brother in the most likely hiding spot to launch a puppet so that he might capture one of the people from Iwa when they stepped out of the house they were located at. Seeing his brother's figure, he stepped forward, letting his sand move forward, which resulted in Shikamaru letting out a groan and his trademark phrase. What a drag. Gaara moved closer, then used his sand to wrap around Kankuro's waist, yanking him back. He heard a yelp from his brother, then suspended him upside down using his sand, crossing his arms and looking his older brother in the eye while he hung upside down. His brother spluttered. Gaara, what do you think you're doing, Kankuro? What am I doing? What are you doing interfering with what I'm doing? You're an idiot. Gaara's eyes drifted over to where Kurasuchi now stood. He watched Kankuro point at her. What are you doing here? What is she doing here, Gaara? Let me think. You were trying to sneak attack Shinobi from Iwa, so if you think I wouldn't be involved in this plan to capture you, you must be an even bigger idiot than I thought. Excuse me? Kankuro's teeth gritted together. Stay away from my brother, bitch. Kankuro. I don't care, Gaara. She's from Iwa, so she's trying to sink her claws into you and manipulate you. Yeah, well, given the fact you're a paranoid older brother, I can't blame you for thinking that. Actually, I can't blame you given the history between our two villages. You started that off with me being paranoid. I am not paranoid. Tell her, Gaara, I'm not paranoid. Dude, you're acting paranoid. Shikamaru stepped over, his arms crossing his chest. Like, seriously, you should be at your sister's side, not discussing your… This is absolutely the right time to discuss my younger brother's love life. He shouldn't even have a love life to discuss. Yeah, I've got to agree with the whole paranoid older brother thing. Ino spoke up from who knows where. Choji followed suit. Gaara, why did you have to bring all of them into this? They're a part of Shikamaru's team. That's not an answer. Well, it was my dad's plan to capture you, but he wasn't going to let Gaara talk you out of doing something which would be politically unsound at this point. He is investigating still with Baki what's going on, but the Tsuchikage is here with all of his people. Excluding Kurasuchi, of course, as she's here with us. This doesn't change the fact he and I need to have a serious conversation regarding his priorities. Kankuro was not letting the matter go. If Gaara were a person who sighed, he would sigh right now. That is correct. The sound of another voice made Gaara's eyes blink. He turned and looked at the person who joined them. He saw the two other elders from Suna looking at him, one remaining calm while the other glared. Please put your brother down, Lord Cage, so we can discuss your foolhardiness regarding striking up a romantic relationship with the enemy. Gaara found himself staring at the elder who called out to him, not reacting to the demand of putting Kankuro down. For some reason, he felt like being defiant towards the men, particularly when Baki put his mind towards supporting Gaara's relationship with Kurasuchi, yet on the other hand. He turned and looked at his older brother, tilted his head while Kankuro glared. Gaara felt continuing to use his sand to keep his brother hanging from the air really wasn't fair to his older brother. More importantly, he found himself pondering the situation. Kankuro said nothing, almost as if waiting for Gaara to decide when the elder cleared his voice, but one eyebrow shot up. Lord Cage, the only reason I'm putting Kankuro down is for Kankuro's sake, not your own, but… He turned to glare at his brother. He watched Kankuro's mouth twitch. Oh, yeah, I promise not to go after any of the shinobi from Iwa today, and for the time being. Well, I'll go for that. Gaara lowered his brother to the ground, then turned back towards the elder, but not before turning to look up at Kurasuchi. The way her face contorted said she wasn't thrilled regarding the conversation the elder wanted with him, yet in the back of Gaara's mind, He found himself wondering why only one of the elders approached him. He turned, looking the man in the eye. "Where is the other elder who came with us? He's in agreement with me on this, that your liaison is to end here and now." Gaara stared at the man, his head tilting, contemplating his response despite the fact he knew the response would be an affirmative no on his part. He couldn't help how he felt about Kurisuchi, and while these feelings might be childish, he didn't want to ignore them either. Still, in the back of his mind, he knew the elder in front of him wouldn't be happy with any answer other than yes. As such, he wanted an answer of no which would majorly rankle the man in front of him. Gaara can date whoever he wants. His seafoam-colored eyes stared at the elder, knowing full well the person who said this wasn't the elder in front of him. It wasn't Shikimaru or anyone on Shikamaru's team, nor was it Kurisuchi. Instead, it was Kankuro. Gaara turned his head and looked at his older brother, surprised that he agreed with him. Of course, this felt too easy, as if there was some kind of catch to his brother agreeing so readily to him dating Kurisuchi, particularly when he voiced his disagreement before. "If you don't mind, we should be at the hospital waiting for Tamari to wake up, but you'd better not do anything to the Iwa shinobi." One of Gaara's eyebrows shot up, watching his brother walk away from the place. He glanced up at Kurisuchi, who seemed slightly amused at Kankuro's reaction, yet probably also thinking his reaction was too easy. Kankuro started walking away and Gaara followed after his older brother. They walked to the hospital in silence. Patiently, Gaara waited for the ball to drop, for Kankuro to say how he really felt. Of course, he said nothing even as they entered Temari's room. He felt his chest tightened, looking at his sister lying there silently. This wasn't like the other times he'd spent sitting in her room because his insomnia prevented him from sleeping, yet he wanted some kind of company late at night, not to mention in the back of his mind he wanted to know his brother and sister were okay. He walked over, gently taking her hand, noticing the bandages. At that moment, his throat tightened significantly. While her hands were calloused from using her shinobi tools, they were still soft. Taking a deep breath, he sat down, looking at Kankuro. So, Kankuro didn't look at all pleased with him, giving him the look that indicated his level of frustration. His older brother stood there, his arms folded across his chest. His older brother took a deep breath, letting out, "Look, I know I said I was fine, but I'm really not." Kankuro's fingers tapped against his arm, indicating he was likely trying to control his temper. "I don't like her. I don't like her at all. Why did you tell the elder you didn't have a problem with me dating Kurisuchi?" "Because I found him irritating." Kankuro narrowed his eyes at his brother, his jaw tightening, indicating he was still upset regarding the situation. Gaara waited, unsure of what he should say, given the fact he knew full well how angry Kankuro was with him for not telling him, yet he wondered if there wasn't something more. Kankuro's fingers stopped tapping, his eyes looking right into Gaara's. "You aren't going to say something? I'm not sure if there is anything for me to say." "You don't think?" Kankuro's voice strained. "You went behind our backs, Gaara? Do you even understand how that makes us feel? Do you even understand what kind of trouble you've gotten yourself into? How the village will see you once they find out? Because they are going to find out." "Kankuro, don't Kankuro me. I've every right to be angry with you. You went behind Tamari and my back and started dating someone from Iwa, not even once thinking about what this would do to us, our family. How can you possibly think this will turn out okay? I mean, I can't for the life of me imagine how this can turn out well. It's a disaster waiting to happen if it's not already happened. I mean, look at Tamari." Gaara looked at his sister, before looking back at Kankuro. "Do you really think Tamari would be in this situation if you'd not started dating that girl? And you had the gall to bring her to the waiting room when Tamari was in surgery. How can you not? Stop arguing, you two." Gaara's eyes widened upon hearing Tamari speak. "Stop arguing, you two." Gaara's eyes widened upon hearing Tamari speak. Gauging her voice, she definitely sounded tired, not that he could blame her for feeling this way. He found himself moving closer, his mind contemplating whether he was dreaming that Tamari was awake. "Tamari." She let out a sigh, closing her eyes, moving only slightly as if she were in pain. "I'm here, Gaara." He felt elated at that moment, knowing Tamari was awake and talking to them. The corners of his mouth twisted up, yet faltered when he remembered she'd asked for them to stop arguing. Of course, the correct course of action was to apologize for making his sister upset, yet try not to argue with Kankuro anymore. "I'm sorry. We'll stop. I'll stop." "Stop? We need to have this discussion. I mean, stop. Tamari let out a sigh, lifting a hand to her forehead. Gaara watched how stifling she moved, taking in how much pain she was in. Tamari. The sound of him calling out her name made her turn her head and look him in the eye while she carefully contemplated what she was seeing. She then said, "I'm okay, Gaara." "No, you're not. You were attacked last night. I'm sorry that I wasn't there." She tilted her head slightly. "Don't apologize for that. It wasn't your fault." "Yeah, well, none of this would have happened to you if you wasn't dating that girl from Iwa." Kankuro glared at Gaara. Gaara's eyes blinked, taking in what his brother said, glad Kankuro was, well, not yelling anymore, particularly when Tamari needed her rest. He also imagined Lady Tsunade would likely have something to say regarding Kankuro yelling. He glanced over at Tamari, then glanced down at his hands. "I don't disagree, this is something we need to talk about, but what? I don't." Let Gaara finish. Tamari interrupted Kankuro, making his older brother shut up. "We should let Tamari rest. She wouldn't be in this mess." "Stop, seriously." Tamari took a deep breath, her eyes closing. "I'm sorry." Gaara looked at the ground, wishing he and Kankuro would finish arguing like she wanted, yet the way he felt about Kurisuchi wasn't something which would go away overnight. Making matters worse, Baki is siding with Gaara on this. Baki is. Tamari's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at Gaara. He doesn't have issues with this. I wouldn't say he doesn't have issues. Then, Tamari turned her head, pondering what she just learned. She shook her head, opening her mouth. "See, you have a problem with. Don't put words into my mouth, Kankuro. I'm not sure what to think, so I'll think about it later." As Gaara pointed out, "I should be resting, but you're certainly not helping the matter. In case you haven't noticed Tamari." Yes, I know. Gaara is dating someone. He's dating someone from Iwa." Tamari took a deep breath. "I'm aware of that as well, Kankuro." "Then how come you're not making a big deal about this right now?" "Because I just got out of major surgery." He brought her with him while he was in the waiting room. "Please explain to him why that is an issue." Gaara opened his mouth. "She was given an order by the Tsuchikage to escort me. There was he and Baki were handling other things." Kankuro pointed at Gaara. "See, I don't get why they're suddenly getting along and fine with this whole thing. It's definitely out of character for Baki, sis. I think they were right in assuming their priority should be helping the Hokage in figuring out who attacked Tamari, but my position was being there when Tamari got out of surgery. We should have both been here, but you. This isn't about my behavior." "What did he do?" "He planned on attacking the Iwa shinobi for what happened to you without any proof. He blamed the Tsuchikage and Kurisuchi until he learned Baki and I were with them the night before and thus able to provide an alibi." "Wait, what?" "See, Gaara. Tamari found that strange as well." "Why did you and Baki do that?" "Because I'd effectively created a political mess and we needed to handle the situation. Since neither you or Kankuro were there to start the process as my legal guardian, he stepped in." "Tamari, talk some sense into him." "Yes, well, it wasn't a shinobi from Iwa who attacked me, so I think the one lacking sense here is the younger brother who decided to go and attack certain shinobi without proof." She let out a groan of pain as she moved. "Seriously, this is going to take time to heal. How is that worse than Gaara siding with the enemy?" Gaara gave his brother a rather exasperated look. "They're not the enemy in this situation, but that kind of attitude, that we can't become allies with them. Becoming allies with them doesn't mean making out with them. Kankuro, knock it off." Tamari let out a sigh. "Look, he's right in the fact they're not our enemies in this situation. I wouldn't go so far as to call them our allies, but didn't you hear me when I said they weren't the ones who attacked me? There is no way you could possibly know that, Tamari." "Oh yes there is. I can possibly know because guess what? I saw my attacker." "Wait, you saw your attacker?" Gaara shook his head. "If they knew that, why are you alive?" "Gaara, sweetheart, I don't think they expected me to live. I think the fact our healers aren't on the level of Lady Tsunade made them underestimate the chances of me living. Not to mention I've quite the will to live, thank you very much. Someone still has to take care of you." Gaara closed his eyes, putting the pieces together. His sister wouldn't bring up the medical nin in their village unless it was someone from their village, yet the only ones there were in fact. It was one of the elders who came with us, wasn't it? Gaara struggled with taking in the fact one of the elders would attack his sister. One of the first thoughts which crossed his mind when Tamari stated who attacked her, even confirmed his suspicions, much to Konkuro's utter horror. Was whether the man did this because the man thought of him as some kind of monster still. He ended up saying this out loud, to which Tamari and Konkuro at first tried telling him this wasn't the case, but then they agreed maybe this was true. Both followed this up by insisting the problem was with the man. It really was one of the elders? How many times do I need to tell you, Konkuro? And in another village, Gaara looked at his hands. They'd talk and talk about me causing some kind of political mess, but there they are causing one, not to mention. His eyes narrowed. He did this, I think, to cause tension between our two villages, maybe using Kurisuchi and my relationship too. Gaara, stop. Don't blame yourself, or the fact you've feelings for Kurisuchi. Tamari, he can't possibly. Honestly, I'm not sure whether his feelings for her or hers for him are genuine. That's not the point. It was the point when you stormed out last night. You told me I couldn't possibly know. I still think there's a lot about the world for you to learn about, but… Tamari took a deep breath. There's a reason you're the case cage, and not because you're easy for the council to manipulate. From there, they proceeded in telling Lady Tsunade without letting the elder know. In the pit of his stomach, he knew full well he didn't like another village getting involved with the village matters of Suna. Yet the elder made the mistake of trying to assassinate Tamari in one of their allied villages in hopes the blame would end up on Iwa's shoulders. The elder, of course, wouldn't expect him to allow Konoha Shinobi to arrest the elder. The other elder was honestly surprised, yet something in Gaara's mind said this man wasn't as in line with the plans of the other elder. He spoke up less, never insisted everyone would side with getting Baki off the council. Even if he was, the fact the one elder ended up caught would mean he would at least be more cautious regarding moving forward. Of course, this didn't change the fact the village would likely have found out by the time they got back, not to mention Baki would have a political mess on his hands. In the long run, Gaara didn't plan on causing such troubles for Baki, yet these problems in fact occurred. He was also unsure of how to proceed with Kurisuchi. In the back of his mind, he knew he needed to apologize for the actions of one of his villagers to frame their village, yet he didn't want to leave Temari's side. As such, he sent a letter saying he'd like to speak with the Tsuchikage regarding the matter, yet wished to wait a couple of days while his sister healed enough so she could freely leave the hospital room on her own. He'd not expected Tamari to join them for the meeting, yet his eyes traveled over to her, watching her carefully. In the back of his mind, he remembered Konkuro insisting he wanted to come as well, only for Tamari to outright forbid this, meaning on Suna's side it was Tamari, Baki, and him. Gaara bowed. I wish to apologize for the actions of one of our village elders. You mean with the fact they want to plan a war between our two villages? The Tsuchikage let out a sigh. You like the idea of peace a lot. It's not so much I like the idea of peace, but so much I rather expect peace to be better than war for everyone involved. Well, that is true, but I should tell you your real thoughts. You weren't prepared for someone in your own village to try and start something. I'm still learning. It's not a matter of you still needing to learn, Lord Casecage. The Tsuchikage rubbed the back of his head. This had nothing to do with them wanting war between our two villages. If that was their goal, they could have done it so many other ways, right? Correct. It's you they want to undermine. They can't control you, but they also want to crush you. I'm guessing his support for our relationship is now removed. Gaara looked at his hands. Kurisuchi cleared her voice, making him look up. The Tsuchikage looked up as well. So, what I'm going to say has a but in there. I still want to be in a relationship with Gaara regardless of what you think. What is the but here? She answered her grandfather. She's important to him as well, but our relationship resulted in her getting hurt. I'm here in the room, but I also have a name. It's Tamari. Gaara looked over at his older sister. In his mind, she should be resting. If the Tsuchikage doesn't mind, I'd like to give my blessing. Tamari looked at him, smiling. His mouth opened, wondering what changed her mind, let alone how they'd convince Konkuro. Well, she does care about you. I also think the relationship is actually politically advantageous, though some won't see it that way. The Tsuchikage's words. Gaara couldn't read him, but it seemed like for now things were resolved. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.